I am going to show you a fatty liver fix that is so fast it will make your head spin. Within 6 days, less than a week, you can drop 31% of the fat from your liver. I am going to show you exactly how. Do you have to get an MRI at the hospital? No. Do you have to get an ultrasound? Not necessarily. There are simple things you can do to know if you have a fatty liver. If you have belly fat, what that fat is, it is called visceral fat. And that is fat that has spilled over from your liver, filling up with fat. One of the challenges when you go to the doctor with fatty liver is they will tell you just to lose weight. That is not necessarily the best advice. I am going to give you much better advice because a fatty liver is not a fat problem, it is a liver problem. And you have to know what to do to remove the fat off the liver. And out of all the parts of your body that are fat, the liver will shed the fat the fastest, which is the good news. There is actually no bad news if you understand how to do it. So I'm going to get right into it. You do not get a fatty liver from just eating fat. You get it from eating a very specific type of sugar called fructose mainly. The unique thing about fructose is that it can really only be metabolized by your liver, whereas glucose can be broken down and used by all of your cells. So when you consume fructose, it can only be dealt with by your liver, and if you are consuming a lot of it, it can really not just fill up the liver with fat, it can damage the liver itself. In other words, fructose can be converted to fat in the liver, and then it creates damage, inflammation, and then that is what leads to the scar tissue. We have been taught for 40 years to avoid fat, avoid red meat, told that we can actually do more carbohydrates and juice and pasta and cereals and crackers and biscuits. It was part of the food pyramid in the 90s. Very bad advice because that is what caused non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It is coming from the carbohydrates. And what is really wild about this is when you do an ultrasound or an MRI on the liver, they can detect how much that liver is filled with fat. But the good news is if you can catch it in time, there is a way to remove that fat extremely fast. But if you really do not know what to do, the fat will come right back and cause the same problem. I am going to show you what to do. There was a study put out by PNAS. Researchers took people with a fatty liver and put them on a very specific diet for less than a week, just 6 days. Measured the livers with an MRI before and after. Less than a week later, the liver fat had dropped on average by 31%. And you do not need to go get an MRI at this point. But by the end of this video, you will know what to do, you will know what to eat, you will know what to avoid. But this is not about losing weight. This is about knowing what to do to turn down the dial of this fat dumping into the liver. Now, there are 3 simple ways to determine if you have fat in the liver. I have already mentioned the belly. If your belly is protruded but also the back of your neck. If you look in the mirror and you can look at the back of your neck. If your neck is darker or it feels very velvety and kind of like the skin is thick, or your groin or your armpits have darkened skin and it has a velvety type feel to it, suspect you have a fatty liver or skin tags. All 3 of these indicate you have high insulin, and if you have high insulin, you are going to have a fatty liver. So the question is why? Well, high insulin causes a lot of storage of fat, especially in the liver. And what happens when the liver gets damaged because of all the refined carbohydrates, you develop resistance against insulin. So what that means in simple terms is the pancreas that is making insulin has no turnoff, and it starts just flooding the body with so much insulin that excess insulin just causes a massive storage of fat on the liver. Now I want you to do something. You can either pause the video right now or do this at the end of the video, but I want you to take a tape measure and measure around your waist at the level of the belly button, and you are going to write down that number. 2 days later, we are going to measure it again, and then in 72 hours, that is 3 days, you are going to measure it, and then in 6 days, you are going to measure it, and at 6 days, it should be at least 2 inches smaller. But at 48 hours, you should see at least a ½ an inch shrinkage in your midsection. What is fascinating about people with liver damage is they do not usually die of liver failure. They usually die of either a heart attack or a stroke. Why? Because the same thing that is causing inflammation in the liver is also creating inflammation in your arteries. These refined carbohydrates and sugars are not just doing it to the liver, they are doing it to the entire body. As you do this, you just might find that if you have high blood pressure, that is going to start coming down. If you have higher cholesterol, that will start balancing out. If you have fatigue, you will start having more energy. If you have sleep apnea, you are going to find that is doing much better. But the problem with the fatty liver is there are not a lot of symptoms. You can visually see it by these indicators, but people do not usually feel it until the later stages. Now, if you are finding this helpful, make sure you subscribe to PRO Health Tips right now and hit that bell icon so you never miss any of our health videos. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me which city are you watching this video from. I would love to know where all of you are joining from around the world. Now, let me share some powerful studies with you. In one study, liver fat began to drop in just 2 days by restricting carbohydrates. In another study, UCSF researchers took 41 kids with fatty liver, kept their calories exactly the same, not less, not more. One thing they did change, they swapped out fructose for starch. Now, starch is mainly glucose, but 9 days later, a little longer than a week, using an MRI showed that the liver fat dropped almost 50% in these children. And so I just want to emphasize it is not really good for you, and especially your kids, to drink juice. Of course, the obvious one is the soda, especially with the high fructose corn syrup. That is really bad. But juice is not much better. Kids and adults need to avoid it. Why? Because it is loaded with fructose. The third study, which is surprising for a lot of people, involves coffee. A study following over 200,000 adults compared coffee drinkers with non-coffee drinkers, and people that drink coffee had a 46% lower risk of dying from chronic liver disease. That is mind-blowing, right? It is the polyphenols in the coffee. Of course, you do not want to add sugar to your coffee, but coffee is somewhat protective. I would recommend drinking organic coffee, though, because they do use a lot of pesticides. The polyphenols, which are plant-based chemicals in coffee, are anti-inflammatory. So if someone does have inflammation, it can help lower that. The fourth study has to do with walking, and this is from Penn State researchers who pulled 14 different studies over 550 patients, all had MRAs, and they found it reduced liver fat by 30% on average without any significant weight loss. When you walk, you actually improve the function of the liver, which is fascinating. So what can you do to drop fat off your liver very fast? First, you want to reduce your carbohydrates, especially bringing your fructose down to 0. Lowering your carbs below 20 grams per day is going to be probably the most powerful, significant thing you could possibly do. Second, 3 egg yolks a day. I would recommend eating the whole egg, but the egg yolks are filled with choline. That accelerates the removal of fat from your liver. So I want you to consume 3 eggs for your first meal, but I would not even have a breakfast. I would have that for your first meal at lunch because I want you to consume only 2 meals a day with no snacks. That is just going to take it to the next level and speed it up even faster. Third, 1 coffee a day, but just realize that coffee can reduce the inflammation. I would not recommend adding sugar, but you can add some cream. And fourth, a 20-minute walk every single day. So, you know the basics. If this video was helpful for you, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this. And if you have not subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe to Pro Health Tips right now and hit that bell icon. We bring you practical health tips regularly that can make a real difference in your life. Take care of your liver, and it will take care of you. I will see you in the next video on PRO Health Tips.